to fill the gap between Ford's more expensive models and the more affordable Lincolns. The Ford company organized the Mercury division in the late 1930s, which operated as an independent brand for the following decades, and then as part of the Lincoln Mercury division. In the 1960s, Mercury's sole purpose was to ensure dealers had at least some work during the lulls between sales of ongoing Lincoln models. Mercury's full-size models offered no competition to either Oldsmobile or Pontiac, and the only car that helped the brand stay afloat was the compact Comet, a stretched and refined version of the Ford Falcon. Welcome to a new video where we'll learn the story of the Mercury Cougar. If you like this content, subscribe and like the video. Let's get to it. Around 1963, Ford CEO Lee Iacocca had a completely new model almost ready for its debut, the Mustang sports car, which would later become the founder of a new class of American cars known as pony cars. Designated at the development stage with the T5 index, this model was supposed to acquire a more expensive Mercury version, which specialists from the Lincoln Mercury division were working on under the code designation 7. Originally, the final versions of the T5 and 7 projects were planned to debut simultaneously. However, the latter received the green light much later, only after it became clear that the Mustang had become a huge success on the market. Interestingly, in the final stages of development, the T5 project was given the production name Ford Cougar. The company even developed logos and emblems for this model. The 7, in turn, was to be called Mercury Apollo. However, by the time it was released, the names were changed. The T5 became the Mustang, and the 7 became the Cougar. The simplest and most obvious way to transform a T5 Mustang into a 7 Cougar was designed by Lincoln Mercury by replacing the headlights and taillights and installing a more expensive interior. But the division CEO Paul Lawrence was cautious about this. After all, the Mercury Comet model was successful, differentiating itself from the base Falcon not only with its improved appearance and interior design, but also with its larger dimensions. And the mid-size Mercury Meteor was simply a rebadged copy of the Ford Fairlane and was not popular with buyers. Given this, Lawrence decided to use the Comet model concept, that is, a differentiation between the Mustang and Cougar in both style and size. As a result, the Cougar's architecture was very similar to that of the Mustang. However, the models did not have a single external body panel in common. The Mercury Cougar's wheelbase was 76 mm longer than the Ford's. The overall body length was increased by 17 centimeters. The main increase in length came from the Cougar's front body, which reinforced the long hood, short tail concept. But there were also a few more centimeters of space for rear passengers. Improved interior equipment and trim materials were used, and 60 kilos of sound insulation made the car significantly quieter and more comfortable. The suspension was also retuned for a more comfortable ride, even using softer rubber silent blocks. The main distinguishing feature of the first-generation Cougar was the electric razor-style decorative moldings on the front and rear of the body. The company's stylists had been flirting with this design for many years, but the Cougar gave it its most expressive embodiment. Another unique feature of the model was the sequential turn signals. Several bulbs arranged in a row in the taillights lit up sequentially, thus indicating the turning direction. Today, this idea has found application in some premium cars equipped with LED taillights. Due to its greater mass and softened suspension, the Cougar wasn't as sporty as the Mustang. However, the focus on the luxury segment was still compromised by a close relationship with a cheaper Mustang. For example, power windows weren't even available as an option on the Mercury Cougar, simply because Ford engineers at the time couldn't develop engines small enough to fit through the Mustang's narrow doors. Nevertheless, the Cougar offered a very tempting combination for buyers. A sporty and sophisticated design, of course, for an additional fee compared to the Ford model. With a starting price of $2,851, the Cougar was about $100 more expensive than the base Mustang. Several months after the Mercury Cougar models began selling, in September 1966 under the name of the 1967 model year, the company introduced an even more luxurious modification of the model called the XR7. This model featured natural wood veneer in the interior, a large number of dials on the instrument panel and dashboard, and a combination of leather and vinyl seat upholstery. According to the manufacturer, this version was designed for people who dreamed of an Aston Martin, but without James Bond's wallet. For 1967, the XR7 had a base price of $3,413, $299 more expensive than the standard hardtop, and a solid $692 more than the six-cylinder Mustang. The price of a fully equipped XR7 with options exceeded $5,000, which was quite expensive for its time. As for the first-generation Cougar's engine lineup, it generally followed the Mustang styling. However, the base engine immediately became the 4.7L 289 V8, available only as an option on the Mustang. This engine was available in 200 or 225 horsepower versions and couldn't provide exceptional dynamics for the car weighing over 1.5 tons. In 1968, it was replaced by a 4.9-liter 302 engine producing 210 or 230 effective horsepower. Cars with this engine, depending on the version and transmission installed, also didn't excel at acceleration, achieving the first 60 mph in 9 seconds at best. And only big blocks like the 6.4-liter 390 with 320 horsepower or the 7-liter 428 with 335 horsepower could turn a luxury pony compact sports car, delivering acceleration dynamics faster than 7 seconds. The most extreme versions of the first-generation Mercury Cougar models were the Eliminator series with 428 Cobra jet engines and the Boss 429, which were produced in extremely small numbers. The 7-liter 429, in particular, with a claimed output of 380 horsepower, actually produced no less than 410 horsepower. With that much power, backed by 664 Nm of torque, the Cougar Eliminator went from 0 to 60 mph much faster than 6 seconds and covered the quarter mile in 14 seconds. Already in the first half of the 1960s, Mercury cars participated in NASCAR racing with varying success. It was decided not to exhibit the new Cougar in this racing series, but rather in the newly formed Group 2 Club Sports Car of America, better known as Trans Am M2. In the 1967 Trans Am season, the Mustang team won under the direction of Carroll Shelby, and the Cougar team, led by Bud Moore, finished in second place. This was a significant achievement for a debut model and had the strongest positive influence on its sales. It was in 1967 that more than 150,000 Cougars were sold, approximately 40% of the brand's sales for all cars that year. However, the medal commemorating the Cougar's successful Trans Am performance also had a downside, one that Ford management couldn't ignore. First, the direct confrontation between Mustangs and Cougars on the racetrack was completely illogical, especially considering the large amount of money Ford invested in maintaining both racing teams. Second, the Mercury model's participation in racing sent a very contradictory message from the buyer's perspective. Granted, the underlying luxury image of the manufacturer's Cougar was weakly correlated with the image of a brutal racing model, devoid of any comfort options. After 1968, sales of the model fell to 113,000 units, and it became clear that potential buyers felt this discrepancy. The Cougar factory racing team was discontinued by Ford, although the model maintained a presence in the private racing sector, and Mercury even supplied several cars with 427 Sohacing engines, born in the depths of NASCAR. Beginning with the 1970 model year, the final model for the first generation, the Mercury Cougar became approximately 500 kilograms heavier and 9 cm longer. The overall body length reached 4.92 meters. But at that time, the American car market was extremely diverse and full of offerings, and buyers were more receptive to the idea of a larger, more luxurious pony car than they were cautious about. Cougar sales in 1970 plummeted quite significantly, dropping by almost a third compared to 1969 to 72,000 units. The second generation, launched under the familiar 1971 model year, initiated a strategy aimed at distancing itself from the Mustang, accompanied not only by a radical change in design, but also by a further increase in body size. Its length exceeded 5 meters, the width reached 1.92 meters, and the weight of the top modifications with larger engines and additional equipment exceeded 1,800 kilo. The electric razor-style design elements remained unabated. The headlights hidden in the radiator grille also disappeared. Generator power in 1971 ranged from 240 to 370 horsepower with the top-of-the-line 7-liter 429 Cobra jet engine. However, starting in 1972, for well-known reasons, all these figures became history, and the only major movement in the model's development was toward the lower price segment of the personal luxury class, where models like the Chevrolet Monte Carlo or the Pontiac Grand Prix dominated the market. Buyers, however, didn't appreciate all these maneuvers. Cougar sales continued their steady decline, and by 1973, the final year for the second generation, they reached 60,000 units. A small number, making this generation the most disastrous of all the classic stories. And yet, 60,000 is still a considerable number, not the number after which the model's life cycle is cut short. In the new market realities, shaped by the advent of the fuel scarcity era, the Cougar faced a stark choice. Follow the path of the Mustang, which had undergone a radical makeover to downsize, or completely forget its roots and forever sever its connection with pony cars. After some hesitation, the latter was decided upon. Lincoln Mercury management's orders were to make the new Cougar even larger and more luxuriously equipped. The model's architecture shared that of the mid-size Ford Torino. The body length reached 5.47 meters, and from a design perspective, the Cougar became increasingly similar to the Lincoln Continental. Buyers appreciated the efforts made. Sales of the big Cougar grew by more than 50%, although it failed to achieve the performance levels of the 1960s and 1968s. The year 1977 opened a new, fourth chapter in the history of the Mercury Cougar's development. Still using the Torino architecture, the Cougar was a luxury version of the Ford LTD-7. Along with the two-door coupes, the range also included a four-door sedan and even a station wagon. The wheelbase of the last two versions was now 3.10 meters, exceeding the length of the coupe's base. The largest engine was the Cleveland 400 V8 with a 6.6-liter capacity and a power output of just 170 horsepower. The expanded body style attracted new buyers, and as a result, the fourth-generation Cougar proved to be the most commercially successful of all its predecessors, with a total circulation of 580 copies sold in 3 years, almost a third more than the circulation of the classic first generations of the Mercury Cougar. From 1980 to 1997, the Cougar survived 3 more generations, returning to the philosophy of the personal luxury coupe and becoming a more luxurious copy of the Ford Thunderbird. The model sold quite well. The total circulation of cars sold over 17 years amounted to almost 1.5 million, but demand for cars of a similar design at the beginning of the new century had almost vanished. And in 1999, the Mercury Cougar underwent its next, and this time final, redesign into a compact, front-wheel drive sports coupe with contemporary styling for the time. Buyers could choose between 2 available engines, the 125 horsepower 2-liter Zetec inline 4 or the 170 horsepower 2.5-liter Duratec V6. The last Cougar sold well not only in the US, but also in Europe and Australia. However, interest in the model quickly waned. In 2002, when sales fell to 18,000 units, the Mercury Cougar left this world forever, and no one in particular was saddened by this. Today you might fantasize about what a modern Mercury Cougar would look like, returning to its roots, a more luxurious Mustang, styled after the original design. Perhaps an electric razor would have found its customers. However, these fantasies will never come true. Because in June 2010, Ford announced the closure of the Mercury brand, which had existed for over 80 years. And in December 2012, the Lincoln Mercury division reverted to its original pre-war name, Lincoln Motor Company. Ford still owns all rights to the Mercury brand. The registration for these rights will expire in 2025. We've reached the end of this video. Comment in the comments, like the video, subscribe, and tap the bell to enjoy future videos like this one. See you next time.